Mistral AI, which is, of course, the famous OpenAI competitor out of Europe, I think France, to OpenAI and Anthropic and XAI and Microsoft, whatever, all the other players. Mistral has been, kind of a fan favorite by a lot of different people because it is open source. And so they're allowing anyone to grab their model and build on top of it, fine tune it, do a bunch of different stuff. And it's truly, truly open source. You have people like Meta that say they're kind of open source, but they have a bunch of different licensing things, and Elon says that XAI is going to be open source, but it's not quite there yet. So Mistral's kind of winning that department. They've just released their very first AI LLM that is specifically for coding, and it's called Codestral. What a clever name, right? I mean, at least it's not Bard like Google, who I don't know how long the name Bard lasted for before they had to change it, like 6 months or something. But anyways, Codestral is the new Mistral AI model that does code. I'm going to be breaking down what it's able to actually do, what people are saying about it, some of the specifications. I think it's actually kind of a big move, and I'm really excited about this, specifically having such a powerful LLM that's specifically for code. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that Mistral AI, right now, it is valued at $6 billion. That's the current valuation, which, some people are like, oh, that's nothing compared to Elon Musk's XAI, which just raised $6 billion cash at a $26 billion post-money valuation. But like in all reality, compared to all the other players out there, this is one of the biggest, most funded, has amazing compute capacity and partnerships. They're doing very well, and they're backed by Microsoft along with a lot of other players. So Mistral is, releasing this new Codestral, and it's designed to specifically assist developers by completing code functions, right? So it's able to write tests, which is super valuable. It's good at filling in partial code, which, I don't know, something like GitHub's Copilot is able to do. It can answer questions about code bases, like you chat with it and ask it different questions. So it's like an LLM answering questions about code bases, but you get something similar out of like ChatGPT. It was trained on over 80 programming languages, including Python, Java, C++, and JavaScript. So it actually is quite good at this specific task. Some people are debating, how good it is compared to OpenAI's GPT-4 and kind of what's in there. Right now, Mistral, they're describing Codestral as open, but its license actually prohibits commercial use and restricts internal usage by employees within, the context of a company's business activities. So while Mistral is, very famous for having this open source model, this isn't, and people are calling this thing open source, it isn't technically open source. They're almost pulling like a Meta where they're just calling it open, but you can't use it for you can't use it for actual commercial use, which, like, to be honest, that is, what's the point of code if it's not commercial use? Like, if you have a few side projects, like a couple of hobbies, but like at the end of the day, if you're coding, which is traditionally a very expensive thing, you need to make money. You're a company doing it. 95% of code, or 90% of code being written is probably for commercial use, I would argue. So I don't know. To me, that seems kind of silly. In any case, right now, there is a possibility that Codestral was trained on copyrighted content. Mistral's not confirming or denying this. I think this is interesting. And this could also possibly be a reason why they're not allowing this to be used for commercial use. This isn't also a new, this isn't like a new controversy, because you have people like GitHub's Copilot who was, they literally trained GitHub's Copilot on all the code in GitHub, including private repositories for companies like Apple. So there is kind of a glitch at the beginning. I think they fixed it, where like you could get like proprietary code from closed private repositories from companies by prompting it certain ways, be like, continue this line of code, and it's like something to do with like the iPhone, and then it's like pulling it and you're getting like this secret code you're not supposed to be able to see. So this is a problem that's been in the industry for a while. And while this isn't necessarily the problem that Mistral's having, because they don't have access to these private repositories, people are saying that they're training on copyrighted content, or content maybe they didn't have the rights to use, they didn't have the correct licensing. They're not confirming or denying this. But at the end of the day, when you want like a ton of data, this is kind of a trend I'm seeing with a lot of these AI companies. So right now it has 22 billion parameters, and it is, it obviously requires a very powerful computer to actually run this. So because of this, I think it's actually kind of impractical for most developers. despite it's really competitive like on a bunch of different benchmarks. So its performance is great. But if you think about it, there's two big things going against it. Number one, you can't use it for commercial use. And then number two, it requires a very powerful computer. So like most hobbyists don't have the computer powerful enough to run it, and most corporations aren't allowed to run it. So I think for that reason, it's going to face some struggles. So according to Stack Overflow, they did a poll back in June of last year. 44% of developers currently use AI tools for their development process, and 26% plan to do so or planned to do so soon. I mean, June, come on, this was an entire year ago. So a year ago, almost half were using it, and the other 25% were planning on doing it soon. Okay, well, if now a year later isn't soon, I don't know what is. So we're probably saying at least 75% of developers are using these AI tools. I would be shocked if 90% weren't. Like, even though these things have notable flaws in them, like my developers at AI Box, they got a tab open with ChatGPT 24/7. It's way better than Stack Overflow. The thing doesn't, like, people make fun of the fact that like the thing isn't berating you for your bad code like Stack Overflow commenters do. So kind of funny, but at the end of the day, like, it's obviously everyone's using this stuff. So an analysis by GitClear found that generative AI developer tools result in more mistaken code being pushed to code bases. Security researchers also apparently are warning. And by the way, these stats and like these kind of, I'll give you the negatives. These are what TechCrunch is giving me. They're giving me the negatives. They also say there's some security researchers that are warning that these kind of tools can amplify existing bugs and security issues. There's a study done by Purdue that essentially said that over half of OpenAI's ChatGPT answers to programming questions are incorrect. Okay, let me throw a caveat on that. First of all, I'm not a technical founder for my startup AI Box, but I've spoken with my CTO at length about this because he uses ChatGPT every single day. And he's like, yeah, you can't just ask it to like write you a piece of code and expect it to be perfect, because inevitably it's going to like reference a library that doesn't exist or reference something that doesn't exist. But like, you get a pretty good idea of how to structure and what the code is. You can go and tweak it, and it's way faster than starting from scratch most of the time. So when they're saying like, half of, the answers are incorrect, yeah, like they're not going to run every time, but if you know what you're talking about and if you know what you're looking for, it can get you started, get you writing, show you the format. And I mean, your alternative is going to Stack Overflow and, arguing with people over there. So seems to be something that is working pretty well for a lot of people. I think this is exciting. It's going to be interesting to see what Mistral does. I really hope they open this up for commercial use. Maybe they want to lock it down because I think it's super valuable, and they got to make money eventually somehow, I'm assuming, right? If they're not going to be this like non-profit forever. So this is kind of the strategy we see a lot of these players do: release open source, get a lot of people on their side, get really big, then release like an open, but you can't use it for commercial model that people are going to pay for. Whatever. I'm not going to hate on it. But at the end of the day, I do hope that they release an open source version of this. I think people would be excited about that, and there'd be a lot of value. But, respect whatever they're doing. If you enjoyed the episode today, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, follow us over on Apple and Spotify, and leave me a review. It takes a couple seconds, but like honestly, it makes a huge difference for this podcast, for me to get amazing guests on here and to cover great topics. So I really do appreciate all the people that have left reviews. And if you haven't yet, this would be amazing if today was the day that you did that. Hope that you have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll catch you next time.